So welcome. We can start with lesson number 10, first lesson of the week. But before I start, I want you to focus a little bit on the announcements I made. Um, wait 1 second, please. I'm just going to close the window that is less noisy. Spare. Sorry about that. I don't know how hard you hear it, but it's for me, it's quite loud. And they're doing some works here. So the announcements that are a little bit important of this week is I already shared you in the WhatsApp group, and I also put it in the announcements. It's that next week, Wednesday, you have the first partial, okay? For me, it's important that you do a really good first partial. So therefore, I would like to prepare you as good as possible. And therefore, we will do a quiz about everything we have seen on Monday. So we have already done small tests, but on Monday we will do a quiz, which is like shorter than the first partial, but it will be about everything we have seen so far for you to know how well you already know the content. And if the quiz goes fine on Monday, then it's a good indication that on Wednesday for the first partial it will be fine. And then also, don't forget that the first part of the key activity has to be handed in next week. Okay, you can also see that in Canvas. I told you in the beginning of the semester what it's all about, so you can check. And then to start the course, today we will see biomolecules. It will be all in one class, so we will do a lot. We will not see it as profound as we usually do because this semester everything goes a little bit more superficial because of the online courses we have. However, it's a very important topic. So to start that, I would like to do first a Kahoot. I think you have all done Kahoots before. We first do a Kahoot to see how good or how bad your knowledge is about this topic. Then we're going to review the content a little bit, and that's basically what's on the menu for today. So let me share my screen, and then you can start the Kahoot. The number is, where's the number? Should be here. Yeah. So for one reason or another, students, they like the sound of Kahoot often. I think it's sometimes annoying, but it makes it a bit more tense in the.
I quite like it.
Yeah.
It's a little like a kind of hub, like we're waiting in a hub of a game.
Yeah. Don't worry about your result. That this is not for points. It's just to know where are we, because some of you, they already have seen biomolecules in secondary school. Really depends on the secondary school what you have seen and what not. So is everybody there? Because I only see 18 persons.
I'm having issues with the internet and Kahoot.
Okay. Try to write down the code, or I put it quickly in the chat and you can log in later, because then we can start at least. Where is the chat? So go ahead, guys. Good luck. Okay, saccharides, mono and polysaccharides, they indeed indicate they're carbohydrates. It has everything to do with sugars, okay? Monosaccharides examples are glucose, fructose, galactose, and polysaccharide is maltose, lactose, um, and also starch and other ones. So it's part of the carbohydrates, which is basically synonymous with sugars. Isabella. So DNA and RNA are the most complex biomolecules we have. They are incredibly long, they're very, very complex, and they're part of what? The nucleic acids. Really well done, yes. You get a clue there, fatty acid, what may that imply? Okay, yeah, they're lipids. Lipids or fat group. Okay, everybody got that almost? So what you find in bread, pasta, and potatoes is starch or almidon, and indeed that's part of the carbohydrates. Wow, Isabella, you're doing really well.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is easy, I guess. Okay, well done. Go a bit faster because otherwise it takes too long. They're polysaccharides, yeah, because they're glycogen, they're all made of glucose. They're chains of glucose. Okay. So it's indeed the lipids that we use for energy storage in the shape of triglycerides. It's basically animal fat and body fat that we all have. Girls have about 20% more body fat than men, which is necessary because they need more reserve, especially when they're pregnant and breastfeeding. That's why girls genetically have a little bit more fat under their skin than men have. So focus on the nitrogen, because the other atoms you also find in other ones. So there should be proteins, yes, because carbohydrates, they don't have nitrogen, neither lipids, and nucleic acid also not. It's part of the proteins. And this nitrogen in proteins is broken down in urea, which makes your urine yellow. Like ammonia, basically. Okay, perfect. So there is a phosphor here as well. So where do we find the phosphate? It's almost a similar question as the one we had before. Okay, nucleic acids. Because the nucleic acids, they are held together with phosphate bridges. Okay, a peptide is the same as a protein. It's just shorter, okay? So proteins have a lot of amino acids, and peptides, they don't have that many. So somebody is taking over from Isabella, but there are still 5 questions to go. So the phosphate group, the 5 carbon sugar, and the nitrogen base is a characteristic of what? Possibly more difficult, but it's the nucleotides indeed. So this nitrogen, you find it in proteins and nucleotides is they also have phosphate. So this is an amino acid, what you see, and the amino acid is the building block for what? Of the protein, indeed. 3 more questions. What is used for very quick energy? So in our body, what do we need to have easy access to energy? So fats, lipids is for long-term storage of energy, but short-term is more yeah, indeed, carbohydrates or sugars. Okay, that was an easy one. So remind what I said about the phosphate. You find this only in It's the nucleotides, indeed. And then the last one. Yeah, you're not supposed to know this, but let's see if you do. If you connect small sugars to each other and you remove water from it, we call that dehydration synthesis, because the water is removed and something is joined. Okay, that's more chemistry. I will never ask you that, don't worry. Okay, Luna, Isabella, and I don't know who this is, but congratulations.
It's me.
Okay.
I put my initials.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, don't worry, it's not for points. But you did well. I think you have already a general idea about these biomolecules. Let's do in Canvas now a very small exercise about it. What I also want to tell you is that there is a homework about biomolecules, so you have to investigate a little bit yourself about it. Let me show you what you have to do. So this you have to hand in. Okay. So here you have this you have to do, okay? This first about the primary, secondary bioelements, which is like we have seen in the quiz, it's the carbon, the hydrogen, the oxygen. The secondary ones, they are also important, but a little bit less common. And then the trace elements, they are in very, very small quantities in our body. So you have to look for this. You can use whatever website you want. You describe what biomolecules are, and here you just summarize a little bit of what we have seen, okay? What the functions are. We're going to do that today. So this is the homework you have to do. And then let's go to the content, which is, there's very little content in Canvas, in fact, so I'm gonna use a little bit of my own content as well to show you. But let's start with this very small exercise about biomolecules to get familiar with it, okay? So here, biomolecules, like you can see in my background, there's 4 big groups, right? We have the carbohydrates, which is the sugars, the lipids, which is everything that has to do with fats, proteins, which comes from the Greek word protos, which means important, important or first. It's a very important group, and the nucleic acid, which is the most complex group. Okay, so here you see the carbohydrates. The main function is that we all function with carbohydrates. You know, we every living organism works with glucose, especially animals. Okay, so living things, not that much of the plants. So we all need glucose in order to have energy, and that energy that comes from carbohydrates, basically. So we have different kinds of carbohydrates, but what our body does, it all reduces it to glucose. And this glucose is which goes into glycolysis and then the Krebs cycle in order to be converted to energy, which is ATP. So it doesn't matter what you eat. Basically, everything is reduced to glucose, and without glucose, we wouldn't function. Our cells wouldn't function. So these carbohydrates is a very important group. We store this energy as glycogen, which is a chain of glucoses, and starch, which is almidon. Okay. I always say almidon because you all know almidon. Almidon is tortilla, rice, bread, pasta. And that's why every culture in the world has its staple food, we call that. Okay. In Mexico, you could say the staple food is tortilla. It's what everybody eats all the time. In China and Asian countries, it's definitely rice. In Europe, it's possibly more bread and potato. So it doesn't matter where you go. Every culture, every country has a staple food based on almidon, on starch. Okay. In Africa, it's injera. Injera is like it's not so nice. When I was in Ethiopia, I've eaten it. It's a bit sour, but you have to get used to it. So these are examples, okay? But those carbohydrates, you find it basically everywhere, in every fruit, vegetable, grain, cereal, all of that, okay? Like I said before, the second group is proteins. It comes from the Greek word protos, or which means first. And this is in fact a very, very important group because it has so many different functions, which we're going to see in the presentation I will see next to this one, okay? But proteins, we find them mainly in meat, nuts, beans, lentils, this kind of things. Lipids, it's also an important group. However, it's not as complex as nucleic acids or proteins. Lipids are always relatively shorter molecules, let's say, and not that complex, but they're really important because each of our cell has a cell membrane, and one of the most important lipids for us to be alive is the phospholipid, because the phospholipid is the basic, the functional unit of each cell membrane, and we have billions of cells, and without lipids, well, we wouldn't just be here, okay? And we also need lipids for storage of food and storage of food, not food, energy more, and animals as well, and it protects us, and it has several functions, as we will see in the next presentation as well. And then there is the nucleic acids. This is DNA, RNA, and ATP. It's a very complex molecule. We have DNA in each of our billions of cells we have, and the DNA molecule in each cell, you cannot even, we will see that when we go more in detail, but the DNA in each nucleus of each cell, it's more than a meter long. So if you would take all the DNA out of your cells, they say it would reach the moon and back. It's that long. So it's very, very tiny. It's super, super thin, but it's really, really a very complex molecule. Okay. Let's have a look at a small exercise. Please play with me. It's very easy, guys, and there is some room for discussion here, as you will see. But if we look at the bread, in which group would you put it?
Carbohydrates.
Carbohydrates.
Carbohydrates, yes. The ham?
Proteins.
Protein. Yeah, ham is basically cooked muscle. Eh? Here is already the doubt, because where would we put the salmon?
Lipids or proteins?
Yeah, proteins. Well, the result says lipids, but it has both things. So in fact, we can put it here, you know, it has both things. This is another doubtful one. We have cheese.
Lipids.
Yeah, it definitely, that's very good. It has definitely lipids in it. It also has carbohydrates in it because of the lactose it has it. So I would put it between lipids and carbohydrates, but it has both. Eh? I mean, we can choose basically. It even has some proteins in it. Let's keep it in lipids. Eggs.
Protein.
Yeah,
Protein.
little doubt here. These fruits.
Carbohydrates.
Of course, also little amount of doubt here. The pastas. The
Carbohydrates.
okay, well done. Nuts. Also, there's two things here. I think we can.
Lipids or
Lipids and
Carbohydrates.
Lipids, yeah, lipids, proteins, even carbohydrates they have, but it's especially known for the proteins and the lipids. You know that people that are vegan, they eat a lot of nuts because to have enough protein intake. But nuts, if you take peanuts or something, they definitely have a lot of lipids as well. Yeah, here there is little doubt. I think the olive oil.
lipids.
Lipids.
Yeah, this one we should also not doubt too much. The meat, where does it go?
Protein.
Protein.
Okay, cereal.
Carbs.
Carbohydrates.
Okay, and then this one, you all like it, I guess.
Lipids.
Lipids.
Lipids, and what else?
Carbo.
It also has carbohydrates. If you look the solution, you see. If you look to the solution, you see that fruit, bread, cereal, pasta. Okay, we got that right. Proteins, meat, cheese. You see the cheese, they put it more in proteins. However, I'm absolutely sure it has more fat than protein in it. But okay, it has both without any doubt. Depends on the cheese as well, of course. Egg, no doubt, it's proteins. Jam, yeah, there is no jam, so I don't know why they wrote it. And then we have lipids, the olive oil, the nuts, the salmon, the avocado. It's true, avocado is a very fatty fruit. There is not a fruit that is so fat as the avocado, but it has good saturated, unsaturated fats in it, so that's why it's still considered healthy. Okay. You see, this information is very, very little, so therefore I think it's correct to give a little bit more information about this. I will. You don't have to know the details, guys. We're just going to see the basics of those biomolecules, that you recognize them, that you're comfortable with them. As you see in my background here, you can see the presentation, by the way, because.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we have here the carbohydrates, the lipids, the protein, and the nucleic acids, and I wanna tell a little bit more about each of them. So carbohydrates, it has some subgroups. It has monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Okay. The monosaccharides, I'm sure you all heard of glucose, you all heard of fructose, and you all heard of galactose. So these are the monosaccharides, and all the other saccharides are made of those three monosaccharides. Okay, the polysaccharides and the disaccharides, they're built up of those building blocks, basically. So glucose, you will not find it that much in nature. It's always in the poly or the disaccharide form usually, but our body cuts it down until glucose because that's the source of energy we use. And the fructose the fructose sugar is the one we find in most fruits, and the galactose is the one you find in milk and sugar beets and avocados. Okay. But when you have disaccharide, like D, it means two, you combine two monosaccharides, and if you have sucrose, it's the white sugar you use, and it makes people obese and it makes people diabetic because it's a sugar that is not so available in nature, and we should not eat that much of it because it's really, our body is not designed to digest this in a proper way. We can digest some of it, but if we have too much, it's going to cause illnesses. So this group, sucrose, is also the sugar you find in Coca-Cola and other beverages. Limit it as much as you can because this glucose and fructose combined, if they're separate, they are harmless, but if you combine them, it's not so healthy. Lactose is what we call milk sugar. It's glucose and galactose. It's what you have in milk and cheese, what makes milk sweet. And maltose is the thing that makes pasta sweet. You also have maltose in beer and cereal. This is how they look like. You don't have to know that, obviously, but it's usually a 6-ring. So glucose is a 6-ring, fructose is a 5-ring, like you can see here. It's a ring with 5, a pentagon and a hexagon, okay? And then we go to the polysaccharides. The most important polysaccharides are starch, which is almidon, which is the storage molecule for plants, okay? And then we have the animal version, which is glycogen. It basically does the same thing, but it's in the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom, okay? But it's a molecule to store glucose in a polysaccharide, okay? And then we have some other carbohydrates that are more structural. So cellulose, if you have a piece of wood, the trunk of a tree is basically cellulose. It's like a sugar, a very long chain of sugar, like you can see here, but it's a sugar we cannot digest. So that's why we cannot eat cellulose. Cows and elephants can, but we cannot digest it. And then we have the animal version, which is even harder to digest. It's what makes cucarachas, like cockroaches, the hard shell and the crabs. So when it becomes crunchy and it has a hard shell, basically it's made of sugar, and it's called chitin, the animal version. This is just for your information. If we go to the lipids, there we have some important lipids. You know the triglycerides. I think if you have heard somebody go to the lab and they do a test of triglycerides to see what's the level of triglycerides, okay? The level of triglycerides in your blood cannot be too high, because if it's too high, it can cause atherosclerosis, you know? And you don't want that. But however, we need some triglycerides. It's important because it's the molecule how we store energy for a long time. Okay, so think about the grizzly bear who does the hibernation, and they eat salmon all summer long, and then they sleep all winter, and they keep on living off all the triglycerides they have. Okay. So we definitely need triglycerides, but not too much, okay? Because if we have too much, then they start clogging our veins, and it will have serious problems which will be definitely explained in Health and Society next semester when we go more the medical way. So it looks like this. It's an interesting image about saturated and unsaturated. I'm not going to explain it to you. I hope I can explain it when we're in the classroom. But you all know that the saturated fats and the unsaturated fats, it has all to do with a double bond. And why unsaturated fats are unhealthy and saturated fats are not so healthy has to do with their chemical orientation and their shape. Okay, but I will explain that later. It's not of the scope of the course of today, but it's very important, however. Then we have waxes. So what bees have, this greasy substance, is a biomolecule that is part of the lipids. And then this is the most important one. It's the phospholipid. You know, it looks very similar as a triglyceride, but the difference is it has two tails. Okay, you don't have to. Sorry. Uh, you don't have to know all the chemical formulas. It's really not the goal of this course. It's just that you recognize them and that you have heard of it before, you know. If I talk about a triglyceride, that you know a little bit what it's for, what its function, and that every cell is made of phospholipids. That's important to know. If we go to the proteins, it's one of the most important groups. And what you have to know about proteins is that they are made of amino acids. And here you can see the amino acids. You see that they are made of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and in some exceptions, there is even a sulfur here, like in cysteine. So basically, proteins is like a chain of amino acids, and those amino acids we get them from our food. So we have essential and non-essential amino acids. Some of them we can produce, we call them non-essential, and the ones we cannot produce, they are essential. That's why we have to eat them through the food. That's why it's important to have protein in your food. You all hear that it's a problem with vegetarians and vegans, that they say no, but everybody needs protein in their diet, because if you don't have protein, you don't have amino acids, and if you don't have amino acids, you cannot produce proteins in your body, because some of them are essential. And why do we need amino acids in our food? Well, because we need to produce proteins in our body. And those proteins, they have a lot of different functions. They can be structural, like your hair and nails, but they're also involved in movement, you know. Um, Actin and myosin is the two proteins of which our muscles are built. And you typically see that if somebody is, for instance, abandoned on an island, what happens is that if your body doesn't get enough, you're abandoned on an island, or like the revenant in the wilderness, and you don't have enough food, what happens is that your muscles become smaller and smaller, because if your body doesn't have the protein it needs, it's going to take it from the muscles. Okay, and that's why you become so skinny, and you become so weak. We also have proteins in defense, so our antibodies are basically proteins, and that's why it's so important and so complex, because those proteins, they have from a very important defense function to a structural function as well. They're involved in everything, you know. They're even involved in storage and signaling and catalyzing reactions. Catalyzing reactions is basically when we're talking about metabolism. Without proteins, we cannot digest our food. It's proteins that are the enzymes that help us to cut our food that we eat into pieces, so they can be absorbed in our intestines and transported through the blood. Okay, but this is it's I'm very passionate about all of this, but this is really what happens in the body and everything. You have to wait until next semester, because it's all part of Health and Society, when we really talk about the human body. Now we're just talking about the molecules itself and its functions, but we'll come there. Okay, the two courses that we do, they fit really nicely together, and if you understand everything, then everything comes together basically. um, okay, here this image is also interesting, because here you can see the chain of amino acids, okay, and then they have different levels of organization. So that's why they become so complex, because they can fold in all kinds of different shapes to do different kinds of functions. But it's not in the scope of the course to go into detail now about these things. And then the last group, of course, is the nucleic acids, which is ATP, is the energy molecule, and we have DNA and RNA as well, which is our genetic material, which looks like this. It's in fact the most complex molecule we have. because of its length, because of the data that's in it, and because there is still so much that we don't understand about it. Okay, so that's basically our biomolecules. Um, so any questions so far? I know I went a little bit fast over this, but basically the idea is as well that you investigate a little bit by yourself by doing this homework, what you know and what you understand about those biomolecules. Let me tell you again, I put it in the WhatsApp group already. What you have to know is basically the 4 different groups. What are the main functions of each group? And if you get like a simple example, not complex examples, in which group do they belong? So if I say a triglyceride, you have to know it's a lipid. If I say what is almidon or starch, you have to know it goes into the carbohydrates. What is the main biomolecule of our muscles? It's going to be the proteins. Our genetic material, it's in the nucleic acids. Okay, so it's not that complex, but have a look at the homework. And then tomorrow we will do a little mini quiz about it. It's called the review questionnaire. It's not 100% quiz, but this is basically about everything we see about biomolecules this semester. Okay. Any questions?
No.
No? So if you want, for the remaining time, you can start with the little homework. You can use, if the library doesn't work, you can always use whatever source you want, okay? What I particularly like is that you use a book and a website, different sources, but you cannot do like, the book was not available, so I don't have any references. So you always have to show me where you got your information. Because it's not that I don't believe you. It's just that you learn to have the correct sources, you know, and never ever use Wikipedia and these kind of things because they're not accurate sources. You know, there's a lot of mistakes in it. So always, and you will have to do that for any subject. So always look for the correct sources because it's going to be very important. And that's one of the big difference between me and you because uh, I was in prepa about 15 years ago, or even more, almost 20. And when I was in prepa, the focus was very much about still like, what do you know, and how much do you know, and how much you learn by heart. Nowadays, the focus has shifted a little bit, and I agree with that. It's not that much about how much you know. It's more how do you find the information and can you find the correct information. It's more about that because there's so much knowledge and so much details about everything that it's impossible for a human being to know everything. And that's why it's really important that you start to learn little by little, that instead of learning things by heart and knowing everything because it's impossible, that you know how to find the information and the correct information, that it's reliable what you find. Okay, so that's it for today, guys. I hope you have a nice lunch. Don't forget the homework, and then we see each other tomorrow. Okay,
Thank you. Thank
you're
you.
welcome. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Teacher,
Yes, dear.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Or do we need to do an asynchronic activity this week?
Yeah, every week there is asynchronous activity. So tomorrow we will do virtual lab. It will be a group work, and then on Friday it's basically finishing what we didn't do yet. So yeah, we have certain things that you have to do. Yeah, but asynchronic, you mean that you have to do basically the homework is asynchronic because you don't do it with me. You know
No,
that's
yeah, I thought there was like another work that you were gonna upload.
no. I think we have enough, and basically I'm a bit worried because. Um, we have a lot of content and we have to do a lot of things together, you know. That's what they ask us to do, is to do dynamic things and do exercises together so that you're not completely bored by just watching presentations. But it also implies that we go a little bit slower and we cannot see the same amount of content that we normally do. So that's basically it, you know. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, I think you're learning fine. It's a good way to learn like this. So maybe the content is a little bit less, but maybe you retain it better. So that's very positive.
Okay, thank you.
Take care, Ana Pau.